What the IRS privacy breach says about the problem of U.S. government identity proofing online. In its rush to distribute stimulus funds, the Internal Revenue Service (IRS) developed a simple website to give U.S. taxpayers access to payment status. It failed to protect the privacy of taxpayers because U.S. government resistance to modernizing identity credentials for online services forces the inappropriate usage of widely distributed personally identifiable information (PII) to conduct official business. Taxpayers with bank accounts on record through their 2018 or 2019 tax filings received expedited stimulus payments deposited directly into their accounts. Using the IRS Economic Impact Payments website, taxpayers can confirm distribution of their funds and address any payment errors. To access payment status, the site confirms identity with 4 pieces of commonly used information: Social Security number (SSN), or individual tax ID number (ITIN), date of birth, street address, and zip or postal code. Image for post. IRS. Get My Payment. Form for economic stimulus funds. Screenshot by Michael Figueroa. Indications of fraud appeared shortly after the IRS began issuing individual payments when the CEO of an online legal support site posted a text message exchange between an Oregon renter and landlord on social media. The exchange indicates that the landlord used the IRS site to determine whether tenants who owed rent had received their stimulus payments. Later reports verified the identity of the tenant and uncovered additional background about the incident. Landlords are able to abuse the website because it relies on the same information that potential renters disclose for credit reporting purposes to verify whether they are capable of paying rent. In practice, though the Social Security Administration claims that the SSN is confidential, it is so broadly distributed through legitimate business interactions and data breaches that cybersecurity professionals consider it to be unprotected data that cannot be used to prove identity online. Even if the IRS were to require taxpayers to also include information not routinely disclosed, such as a past year's tax payment or refund, to access the website, unethical landlords may still be able to get stimulus payment status for tenants that use tax returns as proof of income. Authentication. The process or action of verifying the identity of a user or process. Oxford Dictionary. The IRS website fails to protect taxpayer privacy because it doesn't require users to verify their identities before providing stimulus payment information. Rather, the site simply requires users to provide basic identification information that can be obtained by just about anyone, but especially by hackers through records found in major data breaches by Equifax and the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. Essentially, the IRS identifies that the user knows about a taxpayer without requiring proof. Proving user identity online, known as authentication, requires at least 2 pieces of information: identification and a credential that only the user has access to. Credentials can be one of 3 things. 1. A shared secret, e.g. a password; 2. A possessed token, e.g. a bank card; or 3. A physical feature, e.g. a fingerprint. Security professionals consider websites that only use one credential type as practicing weak authentication, easily attacked by hackers to hijack user accounts and steal information. Perhaps the website lacks even the weakest level of protection against unauthorized disclosure by design. The IRS may have determined that payment status was not valuable enough to warrant protection. While that would be a legitimate, though flawed, decision, I suspect that the exclusion was more likely meant to expedite site access because the federal government lacks a single suitable digital credential to prove taxpayer identity. The U.S. government broadly issues ID numbers, not credentials. There is no legal requirement for U.S. citizens to hold an identity credential unless they have some explicit need to prove their identity. The most common federal credential is the passport that American citizens may hold to travel across international borders. In most other situations, Americans either use state-issued credentials, such as a driver's license, or some proof of presence, such as a utility bill. In all cases, available official credentials are only valid for in-presence verification, not for online authentication. Rather, the U.S. assigns every taxpayer a unique identification number and issues a card as a token of proof. That card and number, either in the form of a SSN for citizens or ITIN for other authorized foreigners, connects the taxpayer to a broad host of government services. By their nature, those numbers are meant for indiscriminate use to report commercial activity to relevant government authorities, with only verification that the card is in the taxpayer's possession. Without a taxpayer-attached credential that prevents fraudulent card use, those identification numbers can only legitimately serve as profile information. In practice, that identification number is often misused outside of the federal government to build broader unique commercial profiles. Credit agencies use it to make connections between different types of transactions, such as banking and mortgage lending, to construct a broad profile of a taxpayer's financial health. Healthcare organizations use it to build a profile of a taxpayer's medical history. The number empowers employers to conduct criminal background investigations on potential employees that can span the nation. Long-time use as a matter of commercial convenience has rendered the SSN and ITIN public information that miscreants can easily use to perform identity theft when combined with a little bit of knowledge for how the identification numbers are used. To overcome the credential deficiencies, the U.S. relies on what the Better Identity Coalition describes as a patchwork system of identifiers and credentials issued by a variety of different federal, state, and local entities. In its white paper, Better Identity in America, a blueprint for policymakers, the coalition argued that the system worked well when physical presence enabled identity verification but collapsed when it extended to online transactions. Repeated breaches are symptoms of persistent government lapses. Ineffective authentication has long plagued U.S. government agencies. In 2013, Brian Krebs preceded his breakthrough discovery of the Target data breach with a report describing how hackers attacked the Social Security Administration (SSA) website to redirect benefits payments. The IRS itself suffered a major privacy breach in 2015 when hackers abused its website to change taxpayer information and file fraudulent tax returns. Those vulnerable sites depended on a knowledge-based verification (KBV) process to overcome the lack of a digital government credentialing system. Using KBV, the websites requested that users answer several profile questions as a way to authenticate to the site. Ironically, based on a data service provided by credit agencies like Equifax, KBV systems draw on years of historical financial, residential, and employment data to generate questions that only associated individuals should, theoretically, be able to answer. Despite years of data breaches rendering KBV useless for authentication purposes in all but the least damaging applications, government websites continue to employ it. The U.S. General Accountability Office (GAO) published a report in 2019 calling for several agencies to improve their online identity verification processes and do away with KBV systems. The Department of Health and Human Services (HHS) responded that it did not believe that the available alternatives to knowledge-based verification were feasible. In its proposal, the Better Identity Coalition reasonably argued that government alone confers identity authoritatively. Yet, agencies continue to use KBV because they lack the assured digital identity that the government is best positioned to provide. Identity proofing for online government will continue to be poor. The online breach of stimulus payment data by the IRS is just the most recent example of an identity proofing failure through a website under its own authority, but it illustrates how the federal government lacks three key components to sufficiently protect access to online resources. First, agencies have little motivation to correct deficiencies as they continue to leverage known bad identity proofing mechanisms and suffer repeated privacy breaches. Second, agencies receive limited funding to improve their cybersecurity posture. The 2019 GAO report noted that officials cited high costs and implementation challenges as reasons for not adopting more modern identity proofing functions. Third, the agencies need empowered cybersecurity leadership to coordinate efforts across the federal government and advocate for the common needs of agency information security officers. While the U.S. does have a Chief Information Security Officer (CISO), it's unclear as to whether the role has the positioning to drive a coordinated cybersecurity policy. Until the federal government makes addressing these deficiencies a priority and makes progress in defining a true digital credential to verify the identity of legitimate users online, data breaches will continue to undermine the privacy interests of U.S. taxpayers.